Hello, this is Dr. Ned Hallowell coming to you from my dining room in Arlington, Massachusetts in the midst of a driving snowstorm. The first person I ever saw actually crazy, as opposed to crazy in the slang meaning of that word, was my own father. I was a sophomore at Harvard at the time, visiting my dad at the Bedford VA hospital. He'd had a manic break after many years of stability on lithium since his original psychosis right after getting out of the Navy at the end of World War II, in which he was captain of a destroyer escort. Since I was visiting him on the grounds of a mental hospital, I should have known that odd behavior could be expected. But I had never seen my father be anything but normal. He was the all-American hockey player, turned war hero, turned business executive, turned school teacher after he went crazy for the first time. But as a child, I never saw the going crazy part. I only saw the really kind, really steady, amazingly skilled school teacher part that everybody loved. The man who taught Jackie Kennedy and countless other kids how to sail in Hyannisport down on Cape Cod. The man who had a plaque put up in his memory in the little blue-collar public school where he taught for many years in Pelham, New Hampshire. After he died, they put up the plaque. But on this day, in Bedford, Massachusetts, outside of Boston, when he and I went out for a walk together, son and dad, college student and patient in a mental hospital, still referred to as a loony bin, even though I would end up working in a mental hospital and meet my future wife and mother of my children in one of them. I'd never been to such a place before that day. It actually didn't look a lot different from Harvard Yard. Big buildings, stately buildings, separated by paved walkways, lined by trees, stately trees, with big branches. Dad was wearing a khaki windbreaker on that chilly fall afternoon. We started talking about a course I was taking on Samuel Johnson. Dad seemed interested. But then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he pulled a rope out of the side pocket of his windbreaker. "How about if I hang myself with this rope?" he asked me. I stopped dead in my tracks and stared at him. His eyes had totally changed. They were on fire as he shot me a look I'd never, ever seen from him. He was looking straight through me. "That's a really bad idea, Dad," I said. "I think this branch will hold me just fine," Dad said, lobbing the line over the bow. I grabbed it down and said, "Dad, this is stupid. Cut it out." He snatched the rope back out of my hands. "Get out of my way." He pushed me so hard I fell to the ground. Out of nowhere, two attendants came rushing over and managed to wrestle my father to the ground. Okay, my dad said. "I'll behave. You don't have to give me a shot." I only heard one voice, and it stopped. "It's gone away. I can talk to my son now." Since that day, I've conversed with thousands of crazy people, much crazier than my father was on that chilly afternoon in Bedford, Massachusetts. Over those years, I've come to understand and love crazy people. They've taught me volumes about human nature in ways that sane people and books can't teach. They show writ large what the rest of us know how to keep hidden, and what books really take the life out of. One of the enduring myths about crazy people is how dangerous they are. My old teacher, Les Havens, used to say to us, "Your average banker is more dangerous than your average crazy person." Les, who was a brilliant, brilliant teacher and now resides in heaven, really understood the process of psychosis and really understood the wisdom that those people have. Which is why the stigma that surrounds mental illness and all mental differences is so pernicious, ignorant, and cruel. I hope during my lifetime to see it burn off like a fog and give way to the sunshine of truth, the bright light of understanding, empathy, and love. What can we do to hasten that day? At the grassroots level, which is where we all live, what can we do? What can we talk about mental differences as just being that, differences, and mental illnesses as just being that, illnesses? Not curses, not satanic possessions, not marks of Cain, not evidence of bad character or poor parenting or moral turpitude. Often the worst part of a mental illness, and certainly the most preventable part, is not the illness itself, but the societal shunning that results from it. Shunning from ignorant people who should know better, and will rue the day that they turn their backs on such people, when the odds are that mental illness will visit one of their family members, since mental illness hits about 1 in 5 Americans every year. The two conditions that I happen to have, ADHD and dyslexia, have such a tremendous upside that I've been able to tap into, that in my own case, I consider them to be assets, not illnesses at all. But most people are not as lucky as I am. Most people need ongoing treatment for chronic mental illnesses, like depression, or substance use disorder, or bipolar disorder, or schizophrenia, or anxiety disorders, or borderline personality disorder, or post-traumatic stress disorder, to name some of the more common. It's time for them to take their place alongside other chronic illnesses like diabetes, or high blood pressure, or asthma, or congestive heart failure, or hyperlipidemia, or migraine, or arthritis. These are chronic illnesses, and chronic mental illnesses are chronic illnesses just as well. When a person stops taking his high blood pressure medication, we do not look at him with scorn. But when a person in treatment for substance use disorder relapses and starts drinking, say, society looks at him as if he's a bum, which only drives him deeper into relapse. This should come to an end. When someone who's depressed and finds the depression medications start to fail, as they sometimes do, and that person attempts suicide, Society often deems that person weak or cowardly or letting his friends and family down. Well, when the person with chronic congestive heart failure eats a high-salt meal and tips into pulmonary edema and has to be hospitalized and risks death, we send him get well cards. Such practice is rooted in ignorance, stigma, superstition, religious bugaboos, and flat-out nonsense that dates back centuries. Like most such stuff, its manifestations are primitive, cruel, demeaning, and beneath the standards of any civilized person. Let us join together in bringing such prejudice to an end. Let us restore dignity and compassion to all human suffering. Let us not compound the necessary suffering that accompanies a mental illness with the utterly unnecessary suffering of ridicule, shame, and shunning. And let us always remember, irony of ironies, that unlike most chronic illnesses, chronic mental illnesses are often accompanied by extraordinary gifts. Our greatest president, Abraham Lincoln, had major depression. One of our greatest poets, Robert Lowell, suffered from bipolar disorder. One of our foremost novelists, William Styron, suffered from major depression. And the list goes on and on. Indeed, it's difficult to find someone of major creative talent or entrepreneurial talent who doesn't contend with one of these mental illnesses or another, be it depression, ADHD, bipolar disorder, anxiety disorder, substance abuse, you name it. Most of our truly creative contributors have one or the other. So it's time to take the shame and stigma away. Let's make this year and this decade the era of enlightenment, the era when we awake to the puzzling but true fact that the gifted and the suffering mind are more often than not one and the same. Let us do all we can to unwrap the gift while easing the suffering all the while. This is Dr. Ned Hallowell, wishing you all well.